What if I told you that everything you've learned about meditation, vibration, and spiritual alignment only scratches the surface? That the real key to unlocking higher states of consciousness isn't just hidden in the mind, but buried even deeper in the very architecture of your body. And not your whole body, just one bone, one ancient, sacred, quietly pulsing bone that's been with you since the very beginning, but has been forgotten by most. It's not something you'll find in a typical self-help book or guided meditation. It's something older, something primordial, something that speaks not through words, but through movement, rhythm, and vibration. This isn't just another mystical metaphor or poetic concept. This is something real, tangible, and accessible. A physical practice rooted in ancient traditions across continents, rediscovered in modern times not through science alone, but through sensation. And the most remarkable part? You've had access to it all along. There's a bone at the base of your spine that ancient cultures once revered as the throne of the soul, a foundation stone upon which energy rises, awareness expands, and the veil between worlds thins. And chances are, you've never even really felt it. You might not have even known its name. But when you do feel it, truly feel it come alive in your body, it changes everything. Because this isn't just about stretching or breathing or holding still. It's about remembering through movement. It's about initiating your body into its own intelligence. It's about activating the part of you that's always been listening, quietly waiting for you to come home. In the chapters ahead, we won't ask you to believe. We'll ask you to feel, to move, to awaken something so deeply rooted in your biology, your memory, your soul, that it doesn't require convincing. It only requires presence. This bone isn't some esoteric idea. It has a name, the sacrum. It sits like a sacred keystone at the bottom of your spine, shaped like a triangle, solid like stone. In ancient times, it was honored in ritual dances, in quiet walks under the moon, in ceremonies where the soul wasn't spoken about, but deeply felt. These weren't people trying to raise their frequency through thoughts alone. They didn't sit and imagine a better life. They moved, they spiraled, they vibrated. They remembered, through their hips, their breath, their rhythm, that the divine isn't something above you. It's something that moves through you. In this journey, you'll not only discover what the sacrum is, you'll learn how to awaken it, why it matters, and how to work with it as a living portal that reclaims everything you've been trying to find in books, teachers, or guided meditations. You won't need perfect posture or polished technique, just a willingness to feel what's already there. So before we begin, I want you to set aside everything you think you know about spiritual practice, because this isn't about escaping the body, it's about coming home to it, sinking into it so deeply that what separates the seen and unseen dissolves. That's the gateway. That's the wisdom we're remembering. And it begins not with belief, but with the simplest act: movement, intention, and your spine's ancient drum. Let's begin. Long before we had language to explain our experiences, we had movement. Before books, before diagrams, before philosophies, there was the body. And the body knew. It always knew. In ancient cultures, wisdom wasn't something passed through words. It was passed through gestures, through breath, through the way the hips tilted in rhythm with the earth. What they knew wasn't recorded on scrolls or etched into stone. It lived in the tissues, in the bones, in the subtle spiral of movement that echoed something beyond the five senses. And at the center of that spiral, there was one bone they treated not like a structure, but like a sacred altar, the sacrum. The word itself still carries the echo, sacred. This wasn't a coincidence. In many early languages, the name for this bone translated to the Holy One. It's triangular, resting between the hips at the base of the spine. A point of stability, but also a hinge. Not just a support structure, but a portal. A place where the physical and energetic meet. Where stillness becomes vibration. Where presence becomes power. In Africa, tribal elders who knew how to move between worlds didn't sit still to meditate. They danced, but not the kind of dance you perform for applause. These were spiral dances, movements that rotated from the base of the spine outward, slow, deliberate, and full of intention. Each pulse from the hips was a beat on a sacred drum. The sacrum was that drum, and when it pulsed just right, something opened. In Mesoamerican traditions, particularly among the Toltecs and Nahuas, movement was a form of devotion. They spoke of nagualism, a practice where specific physical rituals could awaken the original code of the body. They didn't use the word nervous system, but they knew. Awareness begins from the base and rises. The place they called the throne of the spirit was not the mind. It was the sacrum. In Egypt, resurrection wasn't just symbolic. It was anatomical. Their sacred rites focused on the spine and its base, using the symbol of the Djed pillar, a carved column representing the axis of life, the stabilizer of consciousness. This symbol was often placed near the sacrum in ritual burial art, as if they understood. To resurrect the soul, you must awaken the base. Even in medieval Europe, long after the world had shifted toward logic and doctrine, alchemists whispered about a sacred fire at the bottom of the spine. They called the sacrum the crucible of spirit and flesh, a vessel where the raw elements of your being could be transmuted into clarity, strength, and vision. They believed a sleeping serpent lived there, not a devil, not a danger, but a force of remembrance, coiled and waiting. When stirred, it didn't burn, it illuminated. These cultures were separated by oceans, by language, by belief systems, but they all understood one thing. You don't access higher states by escaping the body. You get there by going deeper into it. And the entry point, the key, was always the same: the base, the sacrum, the throne. But something changed. Over time, the body began to be treated like a machine. Useful, practical, but not intelligent. We were taught to look upward for divinity, outward for answers, and inward only through thought. The idea that your body could remember the divine, that it could initiate you into the truth, was quietly erased. And with that erasure, the sacrum went silent. Not because its power disappeared, but because our awareness of it did. The knowledge wasn't lost. It was buried. Beneath layers of rationalism, beneath the noise of productivity and posture, beneath years of sitting still and calling it presence. But the body doesn't forget. The sacrum still vibrates with that ancient rhythm. It still responds to spiral movement, to slow breath, to grounded presence. It still waits for the signal that says, "I remember." And when it gets that signal, when your awareness returns to the base and your movement becomes intentional, that sleeping energy doesn't just wake up. It welcomes you back. So as we move forward in this journey, remember this. You're not learning something new. You're reviving something old, something sacred, something your ancestors knew without needing to explain. They didn't have terms like frequency or bioenergetics. They had rhythm, they had instinct, they had reverence, and they had a bone that pulsed like a drum between worlds. That drum is still beating, and now it's your turn to hear it. The ancient ones didn't have microscopes. They didn't know the term nervous system, and they'd never seen a scan of the human brain. But what they felt in ceremony, we can now see in science. And what they moved with intention, we can now measure in frequency. The bridge between mysticism and biology isn't a contradiction, it's a confirmation. And at the center of this bridge is the sacrum. This triangular bone isn't just the lowest part of your spine. It's the beginning of your nervous system's vertical highway. From here, signals travel upward through the spinal cord, weaving through the body like rivers of light. What ancient traditions called life force, or prana, or spirit serpent, neuroscience now maps as nerve signaling, fascia transmission, and neuroelectrical coherence. But just because we changed the names doesn't mean the truth changed. The sacrum has always been the ignition point. Unlike most bones in your body, the sacrum is fused. It doesn't move the way limbs do, but it anchors movement. It holds weight. And perhaps most importantly, It receives and distributes vibrational energy. Around it lies a web of connective tissue known as fascia, an unbroken sheath of intelligence that wraps every muscle, bone, and organ. When you move with awareness from your hips, especially in circular or spiral motion, this fascia becomes activated like a tuning fork. It vibrates. And those vibrations don't stay local, they travel. They stimulate the vagus nerve, which branches near the sacral region and influences everything from heart rate to digestion to mood. They pulse through the cerebrospinal fluid that bathes your spine and brain, subtly shifting your consciousness. They even affect the electromagnetic field that your heart and brain emit, fields that scientists can now measure several feet outside the body. In other words, when you move your sacrum, you're not just stretching a joint, you're broadcasting a signal. To your body, to your mind, to the invisible field around you. And that signal matters. Most people live from the neck up, trapped in their heads, bouncing between thoughts, judgments, and mental to-do lists. Even those who practice mindfulness often get stuck in a quiet kind of control, trying to think their way into peace. But the body doesn't respond to control. It responds to rhythm, to trust, to vibration. And the sacrum, when engaged intentionally, becomes the drumbeat that syncs all systems. This is why movement-based traditions, whether it's belly dancing in the Middle East, pelvic spiraling in Polynesian rituals, or even certain forms of Qigong, consistently return to the hips and base of the spine. These weren't cultural quirks. They were technologies. Technologies for coherence. Because that's what true spiritual embodiment is: coherence. The alignment of thoughts, emotions, and physical energy into a single resonant state. It's what Dr. Joe Dispenza calls firing and wiring a new identity. It's what somatic therapists refer to as regulation. And it's what ancient mystics knew instinctively. You can't rise if you're not rooted. The sacrum is your root. When you activate it, not by force, but through subtle, circular, flowing motion, you begin to regulate your entire system. Your breath deepens. Your internal noise softens. The parts of your brain associated with stress begin to downshift, while the centers for creativity and connection light up. And most intriguingly, your brainwave state changes. Modern studies show that certain rhythmic movements can transition the brain from beta, thinking and analyzing, into alpha and theta, states associated with intuition, openness, and expanded perception. These are the same brain states monks enter in deep meditation, but you can reach them through your hips. That's not a metaphor. That's neurobiology. So when we say that the sacrum is the foundation, we don't mean that symbolically. We mean that your nervous system, your emotional balance, and your ability to perceive subtle frequencies all depend on whether this part of you is awake or asleep, dormant or vibrating, disconnected or coherent. It's not about shaking violently or stretching aggressively. It's about subtlety, about softness, about remembering what it feels like to move without performance, to spiral without purpose beyond presence, to trust that the smallest motion at your base can echo upward into every layer of your being. Because the sacrum doesn't speak the language of logic, it speaks the language of rhythm. And when you let it speak, when you move with it, not against it, something inside you stops striving, stops controlling, and starts listening, not with your ears, but with your spine. The awakening doesn't begin with fireworks. It begins with something quieter, something subtler. It might feel like a small pulse in your lower back, a flicker, a warmth, a gentle wave that doesn't move your skin, but stirs something deep inside the foundation of your being. This is the sacrum remembering, not through effort, not through performance, through permission. When you start to move your sacrum with conscious intention, the motion may seem too simple to matter. It's not a yoga pose. It's not intense or visually impressive. It's soft, circular, almost like drawing spirals in the air with your hips. But simplicity is not weakness. Simplicity is access. And this spiral, the one that begins in the base of your body, starts to ripple through everything. Ancient dancers didn't move their hips for sensuality alone. That may have been a byproduct, but the original purpose was spiritual, energetic, transformational. The pelvis wasn't just swaying, it was signaling. Each movement sent a pulse up the spine, like knocking gently on a door that had been closed for too long. And when that knocking becomes steady, rhythmic, intentional, the door doesn't just open, it vibrates. You won't feel it like a tremor. You'll feel it like a quiet returning, as if your body, long silenced beneath routines and rules, is beginning to speak again, not with language, with memory, because the body remembers what the mind was trained to forget. You may start to notice shifts, not dramatic at first, but undeniable. Your breathing becomes slower without effort. Your sense of time begins to change. Minutes stretch. External noise dulls. Attention sharpens. You become present, not as a practice, but as a baseline. And if you stay with it, even gently, something deeper unfolds. Some people report visions. Others feel internal lights, flickering behind closed eyes. Some hear faint inner tones, like a sacred frequency humming just below conscious awareness. Some receive sudden insights. Others recall memories they never knew they held. Images, symbols, places that feel ancient and familiar, yet untraceable. None of this is forced. None of it is imagined in the way we usually understand the word. It's not a projection. It's a tuning in. Think of it like this. You're not inventing a new state of being. You're clearing the static so that what's already there can be felt, seen, heard, integrated. You're removing the debris of overstimulation, expectation, and disconnection, so the signal underneath can emerge. The sacrum is the transmitter, and once it starts to hum, your entire system listens. This state, the one that emerges when the sacrum is gently activated, is not about zoning out. It's not about spacing out. It's not the dissociation of overextended meditation. It's not about floating above your body. It's about being more in your body than you've ever been. Fully rooted, fully aware, fully alive. In this state, the division between inner and outer begins to soften. The boundary between self and space blurs. You become more than just a person practicing something. You become the practice itself. The body, the breath, the spiral, the awareness, all move as one. And you begin to remember, maybe not intellectually but somatically, what it feels like to be connected. Not to an idea, but to existence. Not to a goal, but to the ground, and the sky, and every subtle layer in between. But let's be clear, this is not about chasing mystical experience. If you approach this with the mindset of trying to get somewhere, you'll miss it. The sacrum responds to presence, not performance. To devotion, not demand. To gentleness, not pressure. So instead of asking, "Is it working?" ask, "Can I feel?" Instead of trying to force awakening, ask, "Can I allow remembering?" Because awakening, in this form, doesn't arrive with grand declarations. It arrives quietly, when your body finally feels safe enough to speak. And when it does, the language it speaks is rhythm. The sacrum is your soul's drum. And the moment it starts to beat, you're no longer thinking about presence. You've become the pulse of it. There comes a moment in the practice, not marked by time, but by sensation, when everything feels slightly different. You can't quite explain it, but you know it. The air thickens. Your thoughts slow, not because you're suppressing them, but because they no longer lead. Sound becomes rounder, light softer, space somehow more intimate. This is the moment the threshold appears. Not a doorway with edges, not a tunnel or a stair, but a subtle shift in perception, a change in the way reality arranges itself around you. And it all starts at the base. The sacrum moves, gently, patiently. And with each spiral, each pulse, something begins to open, not outward, but inward. As if the membrane between this world and the next becomes thinner. As if reality itself is listening. This isn't fantasy. This is not escape. This is emergence. You're not leaving the body. You're entering it more fully. And through that entry, you access the unseen layers that always existed alongside the physical. The symbolic begins to come alive. Shapes, sounds, impressions that don't belong to your usual mental landscape start to surface. People often describe seeing symbols, not in front of them, but through them. Like something is writing itself across the inner field of perception. Spirals, eyes, serpents. Geometries that pulse and flicker like language without letters. Some see beings, not humanoid or alien, but fields of light, presence, intelligence. Nothing needs to be said. Everything is communicated through vibration. Others feel a sudden, crystalline stillness, a suspension of the ordinary. Like time has folded in on itself, and all that's left is awareness. Not watching from above, but beaming from within. You aren't seeing the sacred. You're sitting inside it. And yet, you're still here. Still in your body. Still in your room. This is the paradox. The gateway doesn't lead to somewhere else. It reveals a dimension that was always layered within your current one, just moving at a different frequency. The sacrum is not just the threshold, it's the tuner. It adjusts the dial of perception, and when the frequency sharpens, the familiar fades. The symbolic rises. What once looked like coincidence starts to feel like choreography. You don't just feel connected, you become the field of connection itself. But this isn't always bliss. The gateway does not judge. When it opens fully. That means if there are old wounds in you, emotional debris, unprocessed fears, buried beliefs, they may rise too. Not to punish, to release, to clear the channel. This is why the ancient ones treated this practice with such reverence. Priestesses, Toltec seers, and Druid initiates didn't dance with abandon. They danced with responsibility. They knew the body is not a toy. The soul is not a performance. And the gate does not filter what enters. It only responds to what's present. When you move your sacrum and open this inner passage, you're not calling in light alone. You're inviting everything within you to be seen, and seen clearly. That's the real courage of this work. Not to feel euphoric, but to feel fully. To meet every layer of yourself, shadow and shine, and stay steady. Not resist, not collapse, just witness, just breathe, just stay in motion. Because if you do, something shifts. A moment arrives when the emotional turbulence gives way to deep clarity, a kind of knowing you didn't think you could access. Not knowledge you read, knowledge you are, a wisdom that doesn't speak in sentences, but in silence, a guidance that doesn't come from above, but through the spine. In this state, your identity begins to soften, not dissolve, not disappear, but expand. The you that you thought you were, your name, your role, your story, becomes light, not gone, but suspended, like a ripple on the surface of something deeper. And what rises in its place is presence, the raw, wordless you behind the biography, the observer, the witness, the eternal spark that doesn't need validation to be real. This is not something you chase. It's something you become, once everything that isn't essential falls away. The threshold is real, and it doesn't require a temple, or a ceremony, or a mountain. It just requires this: a moving spine, a quiet breath, a body willing to feel again. And once you cross it, even for a moment, you're never quite the same. Power is not the same as freedom, and awakening is not the same as stability. Just because a door opens doesn't mean you're ready to walk through it. And when the gateway inside your sacrum begins to hum, when that inner threshold unlocks, it doesn't come with labels, guardrails, or warnings. It simply opens. That's why this work requires discipline. Not the kind built on rigidity or control, but the sacred kind. The kind of discipline that grows out of reverence. The kind of discipline that grows out of respect for what lives in you and what moves through you. Out of the understanding that just because something is subtle doesn't mean it's safe. Just because it feels good doesn't mean it's grounded. And just because it's ancient doesn't mean it can't overwhelm the unready. The sacrum, once awakened, is not passive. It responds. It amplifies. It echoes your internal state and your deepest intentions. It magnifies your alignment or your fragmentation. Which is why, like the mystics of every tradition, you must move it with care. There are 3 foundational principles. They are not rules in the strict sense. Think of them as anchors, threads that keep your expansion from unraveling into chaos. Threads that hold you steady as the portal opens wider. 1. Stay grounded emotionally. This isn't optional. It's essential. If your nervous system is flooded, if you're in the middle of emotional chaos, if your inner world feels like a battlefield, you must pause. Not forever. Just long enough to come back to safety. Because the energy that rises from the sacrum doesn't sort through your emotions for you. It moves them all. It brings them all up. And if you're unsteady, those rising forces can feel less like insight and more like overwhelm. So before you spiral, settle. Breathe deep into the base of your spine. Touch the floor. Place a hand on your belly. Drink water. Speak gently to yourself. You cannot ascend unless you are rooted. Grounding is not a spiritual delay. It's a spiritual requirement. 2. Set a clear and conscious intention. The sacrum isn't a button. It's not a device. It's a living altar. When you move it, you're not just stimulating bone. You're activating memory, meaning, direction. So don't enter the practice vaguely. Enter it deliberately. What do you want to open to? What are you ready to release? What frequency are you choosing to embody? This is not about demanding outcomes. It's about orienting yourself clearly, so the vibration knows where to go. When your intention is steady, the energy aligns itself accordingly. Movement becomes meaning. Motion becomes magnetism. 3. Create a ritual container. Portals need boundaries. And sacred movement, especially at this level, isn't just exercise. It's invocation. So treat the space you practice in with care. You don't need candles or chants or crystals. You need presence. You need stillness. You need a space that reflects the seriousness and sacredness of what you're doing. Even a corner of your bedroom can become a temple if you treat it like one. Silence your phone. Dim the lights. Light something natural. A candle, some incense, a bowl of water. Place your hand on the ground. Declare the space as safe, intentional, and protected. That simple gesture changes the frequency. It tells your body, I am here, I am ready, I am listening. Because here's what the ancients knew, and what we are just beginning to remember. You are not just awakening your body. You are awakening your memory of being a gateway. And gateways need guardianship. Without preparation, energy becomes confusion. Without direction, vibration becomes noise. Without a sacred frame, even the most powerful practice becomes just another performance. This work is not for performance. It is for presence. It is not for escape. It is for embodiment. You are not doing it to impress the world. You're doing it to finally meet yourself. So before you move, ask yourself, am I rooted in my body? Am I clear in my intention? Is this space ready to receive the sacred? And if the answer is yes, then you're not just moving your hips. You're entering the temple, the one built from your own breath, the one held together by rhythm, the one that doesn't exist outside you, but as you. Because when the sacrum opens, and your body remembers what it is, you're not accessing power. You're remembering that you are the power when held with devotion. You don't need a monastery to remember who you are. You don't need to disappear into the mountains or retreat from the world to reclaim your sacred rhythm. You can begin right where you are, inside the life you're already living. Because the sacrum doesn't ask for dramatic change. It asks for honest presence. It doesn't need perfection. It needs consistency. What happens in ceremony isn't meant to stay in ceremony. The purpose of awakening isn't to transcend your life. It's to infuse it with more truth, more embodiment, more soul. That's why sacred movement must come off the mat, out of the ritual space and into your kitchen, your walk to work, your quiet mornings and heavy days. Below are 5 ways to begin that integration. They aren't meant as rules or rigid routines. They're invitations, doorways into a practice that reshapes your relationship with the body, with presence, and with the unseen intelligence within you. 1. 7 minutes of spiral, daily sacrum awakening. You don't need a perfect schedule. What you need is a moment, sacred, consistent, and yours. Set aside just 7 minutes, either right after you wake or just before bed. Stand or sit upright. Place your attention at the base of your spine. Let your breath drop into your belly. Begin to make slow, gentle, flowing circles with your pelvis. Small at first, then gradually wider, like drawing invisible spirals into the space around you. Don't analyze. Don't try to do it right. Just feel. Let your sacrum move like water, not as a stretch, but as a rhythm. Let the movement be your meditation. Let it be your tuning fork. 7 minutes a day is enough to change your relationship with your own energy. 2. Walk as a pulse, turning movement into mantra. Most people walk from the hips up, disconnected, hurried, unconscious. But your body is built for walking prayer. Next time you take a walk, slow it down. Don't rush. Drop your awareness into your sacrum and feel how each step subtly moves the base of your spine. Imagine that each step is sending a pulse from the earth through your feet and up into your spine, like a drumbeat rising. You're not walking to get somewhere. You're walking to remember how your body used to move before you were taught to override it. This isn't exercise. This is alignment. Every step becomes a vibration. Every vibration becomes a message. Every message becomes a mantra, spoken not with your mouth, but with your bones. 3. Let the drum speak. Music as memory activation. Not all music is created equal. Some sounds are entertainment. Some are noise. But some, especially tribal rhythms, deep ancestral drums, ancient chants, awaken something that no words can reach. Once or twice a week, create a space to move to these sounds. Let your body respond without choreography. Let your sacrum guide the movement. Don't try to look graceful. Don't worry about doing it right. This isn't a performance, it's a remembering. When the right rhythm hits, your body will know what to do. You won't have to think. The hips will spiral, the base will hum, the spine will loosen. And in that loosening, space will open, not just around you, but within you. 4. Activate before you act, ritual before response. Big moments don't start with thinking. They start with energy. Before a big decision, a hard conversation, a creative leap, or even just a stressful day, take 5 minutes to come back to the sacrum. Stand in stillness. Place both feet flat on the floor. Close your eyes. Begin that soft, spiral motion again, slow and intentional. Feel the base of your spine wake up. Let your breath deepen. Let your attention gather, not in the head, but in the root. This is how you return to coherence before action. You don't just center yourself, you activate your foundation. You bring the ancient fire back online. And from that place, your actions become clearer, truer, less reactive, more aligned. 5. Moving meditation. When stillness isn't still enough. Not everyone is wired for sitting meditation. If your mind races, if your body fidgets, if silence feels like a struggle, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means you need to move into stillness. Try this. Instead of sitting, let your body guide your meditation. Begin with sacral spirals. Let your breath follow the motion. Let your awareness drop below your thoughts and into the rhythm of your body. With time, you'll notice that stillness arrives not from effort, but from motion. This is what monks knew through walking meditation, what Sufis knew through spinning, what dancers knew without language. Stillness doesn't always come from stopping. Sometimes it comes from surrendering to the sacred rhythm already inside you. These practices aren't accessories to your life. They are invitations back into it, back into the life that moves with your body, not around it. A life where your hips don't just carry your weight, but carry your wisdom. A life where 7 minutes a day is enough to remember that you were never disconnected, just disembodied. And now, with intention and rhythm, you begin to return. There's something ancient inside you that's been waiting for this. Not in a desperate way, not in a frantic search, but in the patient, steady rhythm of something that has always known it would be remembered. And now, that remembering has begun. The sacrum was the first bone to form in your mother's womb. Long before your lungs took breath, or your fingers curled in instinct, that small, triangular bone anchored the entire architecture of your being. Your spine grew from it. Your body spiraled around it. And somewhere in that quiet, sacred beginning, your soul whispered, "Start here." Everything has been growing from that center ever since. Your strength, your movement, your identity, your memory. You weren't taught to honor it. No one handed you a map to the temple hidden inside your hips. Instead, you were told to sit still, to be quiet, to live in your head, to override your instinct, to numb your knowing. And yet, through it all, your body never forgot. Even in moments of stillness, your sacrum pulsed. Even in disconnection, it waited. Even when you believed the magic was outside you, it kept humming softly. You are the threshold. This whole time, you haven't been seeking a portal. You've been becoming one. And now that you've moved with it, breathed into it, and listened deeply, you know, not in a way that needs words, but in the way still water reflects stars, effortlessly. The sacrum is no longer a mystery. It is an altar, a living, breathing drum that responds to your awareness, a key that doesn't open distant realms, but reveals the layered depth of the one you're already in. And when it vibrates, when it's honored, when it's held with rhythm and reverence, reality begins to respond. You don't need to try harder. You need to listen deeper. You don't need to escape the body. You need to inhabit it more fully. You don't need to become more spiritual. You need to become more human, more here, because that's where the sacred lives. The sacrum isn't a shortcut. It's a return to presence, to coherence, to your origin. And the more often you move from this place, not as a technique, but as a way of being, the less life feels like something you have to manage. And the more it begins to move with you. Doors open, timing aligns, your perception sharpens. You speak and the field responds. Not because you're trying to control reality, but because you are finally aligned with it. This is the subtle power of the one who walks as the vibration, not the one who waits for it. And that is you now. Not because you're finished, but because you've begun. So remember this as you return to your day, your tasks, your relationships, your world. The sacred is not elsewhere. It's in your bones. It's in your rhythm. It's in your breath. It's in the way you move, not to escape, but to re-enter yourself. You are the temple. You are the remembrance. You are the living portal between earth and sky. And when your sacrum hums, the whole universe listens. If this message stirred something in you, even gently, don't let it fade. Leave a comment below with the word "returned" if you feel yourself coming back into alignment with your body's wisdom. Like the video if it resonated with your truth. Subscribe to the channel if you want to keep exploring this ancient, embodied path together. Share this with someone whose body may also be ready to remember. Because every soul that wakes up helps wake many more. And in a world that has forgotten, your movement might be the spark that brings others home. Thank you for walking this path with me. Now go listen to your sacrum. It has more to say than you think. And it's been waiting for you to hear it all along.